Recording in progress.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So, Ms. Dixon, if you will call the roll, please.
Mr. Burnett,
Present.
Mr. Goldstein,
Here.
Ms. Johnson,
Here.
Ms. Najilski-Eichner,
Present.
Ms. Smith,
Here.
Ms. Ayers,
Present.
Mr. Ubelman,
Present.
Ms. Revoluz, I see you. Ms. Young,
Here.
Mr. Kites,
Here.
Ms. McMurray,
Present.
Ms. Alterman,
Here.
Mr. Keegan,
Here.
Mr. Livingston,
Here.
Ms. Shanahan.
Here.
15, we have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. I see we've been joined by Mr. Dakowitz. The purpose of tonight's meeting is for a review by Mr. Dakowitz for the Common Council members of the proposed 2022-23 operating budget for the city of Norwalk. Starting off, I just want to preface this by saying this is a work in progress. So we know that the process moves forward from this point on. I want to thank Mr. Dakowitz and Mr. Ellis, and certainly Chitsame Lamb, who has also joined us, for the hard work that they've done in putting this budget together, as well as Chairman of the Finance Committee, Mr. Burnett, and the Council President, Mr. Livingston. We've gone over different things that we feel are appropriate, and this is the budget that we are putting forward for your for consideration. We know that this has been a very, very difficult time. We've said it over and over again. We have people who have lost jobs, people who have been unable to make payments on their home or to pay for their energy, or trying to buy food and different things. And we also have young children who have been suffering in their schools by having to involve in remote learning and actually being out of school for quite some time. And we need to attend to all the issues that are present in our community. And that's what we're trying to do with this budget. We try to be fair and equitable so that we can fund properly the different things that need to be funded, but also do it responsibly so that we don't overtax our citizens, but don't underserve our children. And it's a very delicate balance that we have to strike. I also want to acknowledge the fact that our department heads have been very responsible in living within the budget that we set for them. In fact, last year, if you recall, I asked the department heads, once they've submitted their budgets and the budget was tentatively approved, to come back to the BET with a reduction of 0.5%, to try to find extra money so that we can cut the budget even further. To their credit, everybody came back with a reduction, and some came back with a reduction of 1% and 2% in their budgets. And we felt that they had listened, they understood, but they also know that they have a responsibility to our citizens as well. So this is a budget that we're still working on. It's not the final budget. There will be some changes, no doubt. We're looking where we can save money and reduce taxes even further. We're looking where we can shift money where it may be more needed. So this is just the first iteration. And I want to again thank Mr. Dakowitz and Mr. Ellis for their hard work of putting this budget proposal for my review and for now bringing it to you for your review as well. So again, thank you. And Mr. Dakowitz, I will turn the floor over to you.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I thought this was a 7:30 meeting, but that's fine. I just want to ask, do I have 45 minutes or can I spend more time? 45 minutes. Okay.
45 minutes, so if you try to keep it to 45 minutes. We don't want to be too late on our 7:30 meeting.
That's fine. Okay. So we'll do double time. Let me share the screen. What is this? No. Nope. Try one more time. Ah, got it. Okay, can everyone see the slides? So thank you for your time. This is the Mayor and CFO joint recommended operating budget for fiscal year 2023. Here's the table of contents. We're going to talk about the process, economics, the recommended budget, the Board of Education and the efficiency study, recommended operating budget by city department, unrestricted unassigned fund balance known as the rainy day fund, tax levy and mill rate, and a conclusion. So we'll go through quickly. The budget director sends pro forma budget to each department in October. The CFO and budget director review the requested budgets by the departments in December and early January. Tonight, yesterday, we recommend an operating budget. We have Finance Committee public hearing next week on the 17th. Common Council sets the budget cap 22nd. BET meets with all the departments and then has a public hearing on March 23rd. The BET forwards the tentative budget to the Common Council on the 29th. Council sets the final cap. It's scheduled for April 12th, but I guess the rules say no later than April 19th. And then the BET sets the final budget and the tax levy. Laws of economics as they apply to budgeting. I put this in every year because I want to remind everyone. Economics is about making choices and trade-offs. It's about setting priorities and making decisions knowing there are not enough resources to obtain everything you wish. And the law of diminishing return says, if you put $100,000 into an investment, you get a certain return. The next $100,000 you put in gets a smaller return, and you get smaller and smaller returns for the same amount of investment each time. So these are just the laws of economics that I feel apply when we're looking at budgeting and making investments. Here's the historical allocation of dollars. The city numbers are on the top. The Board of Ed is in the middle. So the numbers from fiscal year 15 went up from 160 to 189 this current year we're in, and a recommended 196.2. On the Board of Ed side, 166.4 up to 208 this current year with a recommendation to 216.3 next year. However, it's important to recognize that the city spends money in our budget on behalf of the Board of Ed. And we have to make an adjustment to show fairly who's spending what amount of money. So on the city side, we deduct the in-kind services, which this coming year is 14.1 million. These are not controversial. These are pulled together with the full understanding of the Board of Ed, and they are supplied to the State Board of Ed in Hartford. Additionally, we segregate our debt service, and we say how much of the debt service is for Board of Ed projects. That's now 15.3 million. We're looking at almost 30 million. So the city expenditure of 196 is overstated. We're really only spending 166.8 million on the city side. On the Board of Ed side, conversely, we must add the same numbers, 14.1, 15.3, for a total of 29.4. So when we recommend a budget of 216, they're really spending 245 million. The 216 is in their budget, and the 29.4 is in our budget. The grand total on both sides totals 412.5 million. We're looking at a 3.7% increase. And last note, if you look at the ratio between the adjusted numbers, 166.8 and 245, and if you go back 135 to 190.
Henry, excuse me, sorry to interrupt. I guess, Dominic, you're getting messages from residents who say they can't get into the meeting.
Yes, that's correct.
Do you know what they need to be let in? What are we hearing?
That they are waiting to be let in and they're not. I assume they're in the waiting room, the Zoom waiting room.
Is that a Larry Manzi?
Larry, can you see that?
Yeah, who is it that
I'm
needs to
showing
come in?
22 attendees that are in. In addition to the council people, I see 22 people that are in attendance.
Yeah, there are 23 attendees from the public. Who's saying they can't get in?
I'd have to go through this thread.
Larry, just check the waiting room and see if anyone's there.
There is no waiting room. They automatically come right in.
Okay,
Yeah, there's 23 people, 24 people now.
okay.
Apparently someone said it happened to them. They had to get out of the link and try again and it worked.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So I guess for those folks who can't hear us, so, but, okay.
Okay, so
Thank you.
the ratio I wanted to just point out, if I can get some of these.
Whatever we're going to do.
So on the bottom of this slide, you can notice that the share of the total amount, the 412 million, 40% is for the city, 60% is for the Board of Ed, and that's been true historically for the last 8 years. Okay, another way of looking at the Board of Ed expenditures. So we start with General Fund 11. That's the general fund that all of our expenditures go through, and that's based on the local allocation of taxes, 188.7 million 2 years ago, 198 in fiscal year 20, and 204.4 million in fiscal year 21. However, there are additional funds that the Board of Ed controls and spends. Their Grant Fund 12 from 21 million up to 32 million last year. There's a lunch fund, 5.5 million, 5.9 million. Other Board of Ed special revenue funds, 1 million. Student activity funds, 685,000. So now the 204 is an interesting number. The budget that year was 208. But the Board of Ed knows that if they run a surplus of 2%, they're allowed to request that as a rollover. And they do that almost every year. So this 204 is a little bit less than the budgeted 208 because they keep 4 million off the table to roll over. But using the numbers they actually spent, this subtotal is 244 million. State of Connecticut pays for pension and Opeb funds on the public school side. And it's improper to not include that cost in the total cost of what is being spent to support our children. That's $30 million. The in-kind expenses we spend, as I showed on the prior page, 11.5 million, and debt service, 13.4. When you add it all up, that 204 million is almost 300 million. Okay, the amount of money spent in excess of the local budget dollars that you allocate is 45% on a consistent basis. So when we look at how much money does the Board of Ed have to spend, there really are some additional dollars there that they are spending. There have always been questions over the last few years about the COVID and the ARPA money. So going through these, FEMA is the Federal Emergency Management Association. They reimburse us for catastrophes like hurricane that we had before. So we got 1.7 million. That was reimbursement for COVID expenses we had on the city side at 100%. CRF is the Coronavirus Relief Fund. That was money that came from the federal government to the state government and then passed on to local cities such as ourselves. We were given 1.9 million on the city side, and the Board of Ed got 7.2 million. Office of Early Childhood, another $452,000. ESSER grants, this is elementary and secondary school funds. I forget what the ER stands for. ESSER 1 was $11 million. ESSER 2 was million. So that's about $13.1 million. ESSER 3 is what the Board of Ed called their ARPA money, 24.8. Secretary of State, and this acronym, this was to help us maintain the integrity of our elections last year. That was $127,000. It all went to the registrar. Our ARPA money comes in two buckets from the federal point of view. The 22.1 million is for us as a city, but the ARPA monies were also given to counties. Connecticut said to the federal government, that's not fair. We don't have county governments. So they gave that money to the state, which then allocated it to the cities on a proportionate basis. And we got 17.2 allocated to us. That's how we get the 39.3 million on the city side. And what I did, just for notice, total ARPA monies that the city has gotten, 24.8 on the Board of Ed side, 39.3 on the city side. We're looking at 64.1 million out of a total of 88.6 million. We've gotten a lot of relief and one-time funds. So that's a good thing for the city. Our total funds available is 39 million. Half the funds were received last spring. We expect to receive the balance this spring, April, May. One half, about $20 million, was designated to reduce the general tax increases to taxpayers, both in the current fiscal year 22 and in the upcoming fiscal year 23. We had planned on $13 million for the current year because that's the amount we needed to bridge the gap because of the tax increase. For the upcoming year, we said, let's go half as big. We're not going to have this money continuing. So we said, we're helping the taxpayers for 13 million. So there was almost no tax increase last year. And this year we're putting in 7 million to help ameliorate the increase. Now, if we have other surpluses in 22 and 23, we might use those surpluses to bridge the gap and free up some of this 20 million for the other projects. But for right now, that's how we're designating it. 12 to 15 million has been targeted for flood mitigation. In my financial opinion, I think this is the best return on investment of any project. We have flooding, we're near the water, it's a consistent problem, and we can solve it. It just takes money. So we have this one-time money. I know Anthony Carr has some projects ready to go with RFPs. He has others in the design stage, and we have 3-4 years to spend the money. So we're looking at figuring out what the right flood mitigation projects are, and with this funding, help improve the values of the homes, the quality of life. It's just a win-win for everyone. Led by Lamont Daniels, he's working with the nonprofits. I'm sorry. We also have economic and community development. If any one of you saw the article on Monday, about 6.7 million for environment and sustainability. That's being led by Jessica Vanashek and Leisha King. And we're also looking, it's a little bit obscured, at high-speed fiber optic cabling for the city. The issues there are affordability and accessibility. Because cable companies are for-profit, they tend to wire dense areas because it's cheaper for them to put it in, and they wire wealthy areas where they can sell $150 or $175 a month packages. What we're looking to do is partner with someone who would wire the city in such a way that we would have the accessibility addressed. We would push them to make sure there are affordable packages for all of the residents of our community. And we think that's another great investment for the future. You've seen this slide in prior years. There are certain challenges structurally in establishing budgets for the Norwalk Public Schools because in Connecticut, the law prohibits a city government from reducing a school budget below the prior year total. And that just handicaps us when monies are spent one year, but those requirements go away the next year. We still have to fund that. The mayor, BET, and Common Council are only allowed to establish an upper limit ceiling on NPS expenditures by what is designated to be given to them. The public schools set their priorities, allocate resources only subject to their Board of Ed approval. So it's just a little challenging when we fund them, but we have no say in where the money goes. The very good news compared to last year is the Public Schools Board of Education and the City of Norwalk entered into a joint agreement with Evergreen Technologies for an efficiency study. The scope covered both the schools and the city. We're looking at everything. It commenced in fall 2021. We would have preferred last spring or summer, but we couldn't pull it off, especially with COVID. They've reviewed a large number of documents. They've interviewed numerous employees, the mayor and superintendent, the chiefs, department heads, staffers. They've spent significant time on site for a more complete understanding. They have had some interim reports which they have selectively communicated with certain senior executives. And the excellent news is they believe they can make the target date of delivering a final report with findings and recommendations in late March. So the caps might be set, but we don't finalize the budget in March. And my goal was to try to get this information to you good people before the final decisions are made to help inform your decision. In my experience, I was a management consultant. I've done efficiency studies and operations reviews. They have been most professional. They know what they're doing. They don't duplicate each other's work. And I think they've been fair, and they get data to back up everything that they do. So I am looking forward to their report. Bottom line, we recommend a public school Board of Education budget for next year of $216.3 million. This is an increase of $7.8 million or 3.75% over last year's approved amount of $208.4 million. The recommended amount for the city is $196.2 million, an increase of $7 million or 3.69% over last year's approved amount of $189.2 million. Here's the budget in detail. Line by line, you have the current approved fiscal 22. You have the recommended for fiscal year 23. We also have the change both in dollars and percentage. When I look at this list, I want to see things that have increased significantly, and that finance department is just out of control with a 15.8% increase. Let me explain what that is. I have about 7 departments reporting to me, and each needed certain investments. Let me go back. The tax assessor is planning the revaluation that has to occur in October 2023. That's the budget subsequent to this one, but he has to spend money in this coming fiscal year to get ready. He needed other professional services of $650,000. They get specialists who handle the mall, who handle certain commercial properties. And at the same time, in the coming fall, we anticipate moving off of the assessment module in Munis to go to a company called QDS, Quality Data Systems. Out of 169 towns and cities in Connecticut, we are the last one still on Munis. So it's important that we do this. Everyone has recommended it. We've been planning it for a year, and we had a cost of $132,000 that he needs in his budget. Purchasing, Sharon Connors has done an admirable job over the last 3 years. She's my little secret tech geek, and she has standardized on software called Bonfire. Utilizing her team and that software, she has tripled the number of RFPs and RFQs she's done with the same team. Having said that, she needs another purchasing manager, so we're looking at $100,000 for that. And she also is in charge of centralized utility bills. The centralized telephone bill needs an increase of $45,000. The controller, doing an admirable job keeping all these numbers straight, has a need for junior data input specialists. Unfortunately, we're still manual in many areas, and we don't want to use more experienced or highly skilled people just doing data input. So we're looking at about $80,000 to give the department an assist on that input while they could do more analytical work and higher level tasks. The tax collector, we had such a great tax sale this year, is looking to do it again in the fall. So that would be September, October of 2023. It's not next year's budget, but she needs to spend money in anticipation. So she's looking for $67,000. The IT department, led by Joyce Liu, continually is told they have to do more and they need more people. They're looking for an increase of $60,000 in their budget. And in the management and budgets department, there's an increase of $56,000 for a budget analyst. The other large expense is down here, 9.6% in employee benefits. No surprise, the biggest driver there is health insurance. Tom Ellis and I had a very interesting meeting with our health insurance consultant. As you recall, last year, this consultant comes in at a high estimate, and then month by month, she gets better numbers. And last year, when those numbers came in lower, the Board of Ed even lowered their request by $1 million or $1.5 million. Well, we had a meeting with her, and she mentioned 11.5% increase. I hope that ultimately that increase will be lower, but for right now, we put in that 11.5% increase. So that's the driving force for the 9.6 employee benefits. Also included in there is insurance expense for liability, auto, and property, workers' compensation expenses, employee tuition reimbursement. So it's a bunch of things. The reason we have 9.6, 11.1 health insurance drags it up, and some of the other increases are smaller. Except for that, I think the numbers are pretty reasonable when you remember salaries are going up by 2.35. When you include step function, that individuals who are not at the highest step get increases for that as well. That leads to a 2.5 increase. Most of the departments are coming in 3 or lower. You have some that are a little bit higher. Fire department was at 6, economic community development at 6, public works 5.9. But when you look at all the departments combined, we came in at 3.69, which I think is not unreasonable, and the mayor will push them to come in with some additional cuts. The Board of Ed came in at 3.75, so the overall is a blend 3.72. Let's talk a little bit about our rainy day funds. Now, when assessing and measuring the rainy day fund, it can't be done in abstract. It depends on what the size of the government entity is. So we look at total general fund expenditures, which have risen from 360 million. This current year's budget is 397. The recommended is 412. Unrestricted, unassigned fund balance at year end, 57.7, which is 16% of those general fund expenditures, 69.7, which was 20%, 58.4, 16%. And this past year, in our consolidated annual financial report, which has our certified financials, the unrestricted unassigned fund balance for the general fund is 72.4 million, which is 19% of our expenditures. Now, 2 years ago, we shifted auditors, and we went to Bloom Shapiro, which was then merged into Clifford Larson, CLA, and their interpretation of the accounting rules is if we plan in our budget on using rainy day funds to draw them down to supplement the budget, then it's no longer an unassigned, unrestricted balance. Those funds must be reduced from the rainy day fund. And I forget what, I think they're put into assigned fund balance. So the money is there, but from an accounting treatment, it goes away. So this current year budget, we didn't use any rainy day funds because we had the ARPA monies to supplement. This $4 million in the recommended budget, which is what we are recommending, a $4 million drawdown, when we get to our June 30, 2022 financial statements, the auditors will knock down the 72.4 by that 4 million. That's how we get the 68 million. And just the way the math works, if the 72 goes down, that's your numerator, and your 380 goes up, that's your denominator, that percentage goes down. So we will be at 17.2%. I'm assuming, as I say, we budget for a balance of revenues and expenditures, so that fund balance will not change. So I'm assuming at the end of 23, if we keep 68,395, we don't run a surplus, we don't run a deficit, but because we will have a larger expense total, that 17.2 will go down to 16.6. Okay, so that's what we're doing with the rainy day fund. I'll make my statement that as a CFO, there should be no ceiling on rainy day funds. In the New England area, the rating agencies tell me 15, 20, maybe drifting up to 25% is considered a good fund balance, a rainy day fund. In the rest of the country, Midwest, South, and the Far West, they see ratios of 50 or 75% or higher. I think the state of California had tremendous surpluses during COVID because of all the extra money they got. And they put a lot of it into their rainy day fund. So this may be a little on the high side for us in Norwalk. As a financial officer, it's not enough. And as you all know, we went through COVID because of our conservative budgeting and because of the rainy day fund. We had no layoffs, we had no furloughs. We were able to flexibly handle a pretty drastic event. So I gave up $4 million, but I guard the rest zealously. And on the bottom, it's hard to see, but it's a very major factor in our bond rating. As you're aware, when I came out with the capital budget, I am very concerned about all the borrowing that we may have to do in the next 7 to 10 years. And I worry about our AAA bond rating. One of the countervailing factors is having a very strong rainy day fund. So that will work in our favor. How does the tax levy translate into mill rates? That's better. We have a certain amount of recommended funds, 216, 196, 412 million. What's not shown on this summary slide is we have to add to, so we have to get enough taxes to fund the 412. We also have to add to that. When we give elderly credits, they're not going to pay us taxes. When we have an allowance for bad debts for the people who don't pay their taxes, we have to increase the amount of money we cover in order to make sure that the tax rate is accurate. And I will tell you, based on the spreadsheets for this scenario, that number, which is known as the net tax levy, is 365 million. We increase it for those additional funds, and then we decrease it for the other tax revenue, which might be special auto assessments, and it might be back taxes. And for non-tax revenue, the most important there is our intergovernmental funds where we get grants from the state primarily, or when we're getting fees and other collections from our departments. So we add the additional, we subtract the revenue we're getting, and we end up saying we need to cover 365 million. What we then do is we do an allocation for the 6 districts. You're probably more familiar with this than I am, but the costs of rendering fire service is only for the 1st through 5th districts. The 6th district has their own fire service. So we isolate the amount of money out of the 412, and then we allocate it only to the 5 districts. Okay? Then we also do the same with garbage. because garbage is only provided to the first 4 districts, okay, 1 through 4. And then we also do it for lighting, which is only provided to the 4th and 5th districts. So we're trying to tax people for the services we render. So we have a core, and then we have the differences for fire, garbage, and lighting. And then the 6th district imposes an assessment for their citizens because they have certain services. And that's how we get these numbers. The total fiscal 22 this year mill rate is 23.968 for the first 3, 2404, 054, 2361, 22166. Understand how we get this. We take that 365 million. We take out the special allocations, and then we divide by the amount of the grand list for each district. And that's how we get these rates. This year, with the recommendation, 24.73, first 3, and you see the others. What's the increase? We have the increase in mills, and we also have the increase in percentages. Then we say, how do we get to an average tax bill? Well, not only do we have the grand list, we have the median home value. If you remember your statistics, that's the number where 50% are higher and 50% are lower. So we take the median home and we multiply by the mill rate. That may not be what your tax bill is, but it gives us a sense of what's going on district by district. So we get these numbers, 5939 going out to the 6th district, the increases in dollars, and then we have the increases in percent. Okay, these are in 2 decimals. You should note, obviously, if all we're doing is multiplying the mill rate by the same number, the percentage increase is going to be the same as it is on the mill rate. It's just 2 decimals, 31832, 342, 34. So that's how we get to the individual mill rates by district. Sort of summarizes what I wanted to say, but I do want to spend a couple of minutes congratulating the pension board. I think they've done a phenomenal job. They hit the ball out of the park. I have some finance and Wall Street experience. When I sit in on the pension board, I just listen and I'm learning from masters. The city is very lucky. You have a handful of volunteers who have been professional investment managers for decades. We have one of the top 4 investment management firms who consults and advises us. And the people on the pension board make sure they get the value and they get the best wisdom and they deliberate, and they've done a great job. The way to measure an investment management team is over a full cycle, from trough to trough or from peak to peak. And interestingly, we saw all of that through COVID. We had a peak in March when COVID started. It then dropped like a rock in 3-4 months, and then it's come back down. And I remember when I first came here, interest rates were going down, and they were buying bonds. I said, why are you buying bonds? I can't wait to issue bonds. But they're very disciplined. They say we have a target mix of our portfolio. Our stocks have gone up, and therefore we have to cut back on a value basis. So we have to sell some stocks, and we have to buy more bonds. It was the right thing to do. It was brilliant, and it helped reduce our losses when the market cracked in March of 2020. They are disciplined and they are excellent. Just to give you some information, which is from this year's Consolidated Annual Financial Report, on page 53, where we talk about the pensions, the police, fire, employees, and food service pension plans all went up between 27.74% and 27.85% in 1 year. It's an extraordinary year, but that's the management of it. The 4 pensions in total, I guess on average, 90.57% funded. Other municipalities, counties, and states are having a tremendous problem. State of California, State of Illinois, Cook County, Chicago, the state of Connecticut. Last time I looked, they're all at 50% funded or less. We're at 90%. This will play very well and helpful when we talk to our rating agency. On page 66, when we look at the OPEB, we have an OPEB fund. Half of the towns in Connecticut do not even have segregated funds. We have a fund, and based on the last measurement, June 30th, our liability, 136.3 million, and our planned fiduciary assets are 140.6 million. We are 103% funded, unheard of. We're definitely in the top 5%. So that's a real albatross about most local governments. They have to take money from their current budget and overfund their pensions, not just the annual cost for the current people, to help make up and bridge the gap. We've done that so far. Now, it doesn't mean we can't slide back. The demographics can change, so our liabilities can go up, and investment returns right now, we are targeting, the OPEB is at 6.5%, and the pensions are at, I think it's 6.75. We've been going down. The target is to have both at 6.5%. So if we have a year where we don't hit 6.5%, we're not going to have in the model enough assets, and we may have a lower percentage funded. But for
Henry, I just wanted to clarify quickly when you said page 66 of which document? I assume not the operating budget. Are you talking about the capital budget?
City of, I don't know if you can get it with the camera. City of Norwalk Consolidated Annual Financial Report.
Okay.
Where we have our certified financial statements and all budget versus actual, a lot of great information in there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I just want to sing the praises. So the good news I have going into rating agency meetings this summer when we borrow is that we have a healthy rainy day fund, and our pensions and OPEB are super funded. So I want to just congratulate Frank Nash, the chairman, and everyone else who serves on that committee. To sum up, I know I have 5 minutes and I want to answer questions. The mayor and I, with this joint recommendation, we think it's balanced, it's fair, there's fiscal restraint, and it's affordable for Norwalk single-family owners who pay the taxes. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Henry. And if anybody has any questions, this is now the time to bring them forward. Mr. Keegan? Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Dakowitz?
Yeah, Nora, why don't you go before me?
Thank you, Josh. Mine is very quick. Could you explain again, because I didn't follow the explanation, between the 6 taxing districts, why is the percentage of increase different for the different taxing districts?
Well, what happens is, forget about the allocations, okay? We're not, let's assume we didn't allocate and everybody got all the services. We have to take a certain amount of money we need to raise, and as a city, we divide by our full grand list. So we say, okay, we need to raise 350 million. The grand list is 14 billion, boom, 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 boom. Here's the mill rate for every home. However, the 6 districts have different grand lists. Some have more valuable property, some have less. So when you divide through by a different amount, the mill rate will be different. Does that make sense? In essence,
Yes, thanks. Sorry, I'm working the math in my head, but yes, that makes sense.
Think of it this way. If a district has twice the value of the grand list than another district, they're going to pay twice the tax. Okay? Because we do it based on grand list, what every home is worth. It's sort of just the districts. If we redistricted it so that each district had an equal dollar amount of grand list, they would all get the same mill rate.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Mr. Goldstein?
Thank you. Henry, I wanted to just do a follow-up on the ARPA funds, just so people know what the city plans on doing with these funds. Specifically, and forgive me if I'm a little off base here, when it comes to the reducing general tax increases, essentially, I don't know if it's fair to call it tax relief or not. Once fiscal year 22-23 passes, and there's been this designated 7 million, what happens next? Does it mean that people can expect that their taxes will, what can people expect after this money the ARPA funds have been spent?
Well, we split it into two categories. So one part says, you know what? Let's give the taxpayers a break. And we did it very strategically, 13 and half of 13, because as Tom Hamilton mentioned last year, and he keeps talking about a fiscal cliff. So if we have increases in our expenses each year, excuse me, and we supplement the budget and we fund it with one-time funding sources, whether they are ARPA or rainy day funds, when those one-time funds go away, you now in the next year have to tax the taxpayers. Remember, they're being taxed at the rate from a year ago. And let's say it went up 5% and we took care of that with ARPA money. Well, next year when we have a 5% increase and 1.05 times squared is going to be 10.5%, that's the 10.5% they're facing. So what we did is, let's assume last year was 5%. We said, we're paying with ARPA. Let's say this year is 5%. We said, we're paying half of that with ARPA, so your increase is lessened. And then the following year, you're going to have the rest of the catch-up. Now, when I got here, we were looking at drawing down rainy day funds, 6 million a year and then 8 million a year. And that was, again, to help ameliorate the tax increase. Fortunately, whatever reason, I'm going to give credit to the managers for some of it, we didn't have to draw down 6 million a year or 8 million. We did much better. And that's part of the reason why the fund balance went up. Okay? But as we go forward, and this is what I had to explain to the rating agencies, they said, that's very dangerous using that long-term rainy day fund to just make sure your taxpayers don't pay as much because it's going to hit you double the next year. And the agreement we had was that this year, 22, we were not going to use any rainy day drawdown. ARPA came in. We didn't even budget for the rainy day fund. Again, it gives us greater credibility with the rating agencies, but that's the concept. Now, the second bucket are one-time projects. It's a lot of the things that we just don't have funding for. So there are nonprofit services. There's the climate change and the environmental issues that Jessica is working with. There is the high-speed fiber optic wiring, which is hugely expensive, but the federal government is putting out a lot of money there, and we're hoping to pull that off with the right partner. So those projects are one time. We have the money in hand by this May. We then get to spend it over a couple of years, and the city benefits, okay? What I've been trying to resist is putting money into people or projects that do not stop at the end of the ARPA cycle. We don't want to have people hired now, and then 3 years from now, oh, we got to pay for them for 35 years. So we are hiring those people on a grant basis, which we have done in the past, where when someone is funded, someone's salary is funded by a grant, they know and understand that when the grant funds disappear, their job is gone. Okay? Same thing with projects. We don't want to fund a nonprofit and then they become dependent on us 2-3 years down the road. We don't want to fund a project that becomes an evergreen. These are one-time funds. Let's decide on the highest return on investment, and we've spread it around in many different areas of the city. And then at the end, the money is gone. We get the benefits if we've invested wisely. And thank you, federal government.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions for Mr. Dakowitz before we wrap up? Okay, seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn this special meeting. Ms. Revoluz, you're fast. Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned at 7:30 exactly. Thank you.